Welcome. It's just going on to 7:30, Wednesday, the 2nd of March, and you are watching Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, giving a voice to the residents of regional Australia. Tonight, we are having an impromptu news session, and my guest tonight is Alan Benn. Alan is a volunteer on the local Cairns Community Radio, 89.1, and welcome, Alan.
G'day, Bill. How are you?
Good, thanks. Tonight you've done me a favour by coming in and filling in for a slot where my guest was who was due to appear has been otherwise detained by water lapping at a doorstep or actually going through a house. So that's quite unfortunate, and I think that's the situation being experienced by thousands across regional Australia at the moment, right from the places like Gympie right down to Lismore and beyond. And it is a news item of the week, I think, the different flood scenarios in Queensland and New South Wales. But tonight we'll just start with general local news. We're both in Cairns. Is there anything you want to pick up on, or I can just bring up a couple of items from the Townsville Bulletin or the Cairns Post, and we can just have a quick discussion on them and just move through a few other points.
Yep,
I suppose I think the subject of the moment right in regional Queensland, especially Townsville and Cairns, would have to be juvenile crime and its ongoing effect on the local population. It's not only just the people in their houses and having their car stolen, it's also the people just engaging in the city with being accosted by different people. And the incidents are becoming more and more brazen as time goes on. It's become a no fear factor for the perpetrators and a full-blown fear factor for the people who are victims. Now, one of the things that was noticeable in today's paper, I'll just share a screen. This is from the Cairns Post, and it's basically talking about parental accountability, and I think we're both well across this with attending the meeting last Friday outside Michael Healy's office, the call for parent accountability. But the thing is, it's like most things, whether it's litter laws or existing laws, there seems to be a general unwillingness to actually enforce them. Like, rather than enforce litter laws, they start bringing out things like, well, we'll ban plastic bags, then we'll put 10 cents on all containers to impact on the entire population, not address the people who are actually doing the wrong thing. But we have laws there to deal with them. And this is the same situation here. Everyone's calling for parental accountability, but we do have laws to bring before the courts parents who are neglecting their children and letting them run the streets. So what's your take on this in regards to what's happening in Cairns and Townsville?
Yeah, look, Bill, what you mentioned before, I would call it disengagement rather than engagement, because there is just no sensible approach. I see in that Cairns Post article, the minister says the laws are strong. I don't know what parallel universe she's living in, but those laws, if they're strong, they're not being implemented. So what's the point of having them? So this is where people are struggling to comprehend how it is so easy for a child to be captured. Oh, well, breaks the law, is caught, goes up for a magistrate, gets a rap on the knuckles, nothing can be done about it, and straight out again, and their parents couldn't care less what they do. So, but I can't understand why money can't be garnished out of these, let's say, guardians rather than parents, because a lot of the time they're state wards. So the ultimate guardian is the Premier, Bill. You know, if they're in state supervision, well, the ultimate guardian is the Premier. And what's she doing about it? Absolutely nothing. So
Well, maybe we should garnish $10 for every delinquent child. And
yeah, well,
you wouldn't receive much of a pay packet then.
yeah, I just can't understand, Bill, because they say, "Oh no, you can't take money out of someone's account." But if I'm an employer, I can be charged and fined if one of my employees makes a mistake on a job, and I can be charged and fined. So why can't the parent be, money garnished out of their pension or whatever source of funding they're getting? I just can't understand why that's not a thing.
I think one of the other things too is the newspapers aren't popular anymore. The circulation of papers are down. But if you just depend on clips from the TV and snippets from the radio and the odd word from friends or whatever, you don't get a decent picture. I mean, the newspaper actually does carry a bit more story and a bit more detail in it. And then if you're really interested, you can actually ring up the newspaper and annoy the journalist or something and say, is there any more information on this or whatever? But it was interesting to see in yesterday's paper, they were talking about the NGOs that are actually running these houses and that for these juveniles in state care. And basically what there are, from my understanding, is there's about 70 houses in Cairns located throughout the different suburbs. And these juveniles in care are assigned to these houses, and there's only a carer, well, from my understanding, there has to be a carer there at night, but not necessarily during the day. But the thing is, the carers at these houses have got no control over the children. So if the child decides to walk out and go for a wander off during midnight plus,
nothing the carer can do.
But they can't. These carers can't actually do things. Although their responsibility is to notify the police, from my understanding. But I gather there's so much money in the system. Like, I think there was a couple of figures quoted that for each of these individuals, it equates to $1,200 a night to the organisation that's running these houses and providing these facilities. If they notify the police that the person is missing, well, there's more than a likelihood, depending, I suppose it depends on the hour of the night, that they actually don't get their $1,200 because they're not now caring for that child, and so they'll lose their $1,200 or so, and then they're not keen to report it. The other thing is they're talking about it cost us $320,000 on average. This is statewide, about $320,000 per year per juvenile in state care. Now, that's a lot of salary, that's a lot of money. And I don't think taxpayers have got any idea that they're up for this sort of money. And maybe more people need to buy the newspapers, find out these sort of details, and then crack a wobbly and go and have a bit of a yell at their local member, because I don't think too many people would be happy to know that they're paying the equivalent to $320,000 per year for each of these individuals in state care.
Yeah, the apathy is just outstanding. It just beggars belief, Bill. But those houses you're talking about, I know firsthand that would be costing us taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars a week just in repairs, and that's only in Cairns. So you expand that statewide, And that's just damage, deliberate, destructive damage into every one of those houses. There is no appreciation of what we do for them. So I'm at a wit's end to work out how these kids are obviously, they don't care, and governments don't care. So they're a reflection of the government. That's the way I feel. And it's not going to get, it's generational ineptitude. This is what we're facing.
I think the other thing is too is there's probably a lot of people in the system, in the greater system than the ordinary taxpayer, who doesn't want to see the things resolved, because it's like a lot of things in the welfare industry. It becomes an industry. These people who purport to say, well, we want to do this and we want to look after the kids and rehabilitate them and that. Well, is that really the primary thing, or is making money the primary thing? And this is what we've got to look at. And maybe it just has to move back, where the state has to take the full responsibility. It has to reopen those sort of what used to be called orphanages, but I presume we could come up with a better name. And the kids actually go in there and stay in there and basically looked after, but they're also controlled. They can't leave the bounds of that institution. And the other thing that they look for is adoption, or hopefully their original parents can get themselves straightened out and decide that they want to look after the children. But
that is such a rare event, Bill.
Well, I think one of the problems is that it's far too easy to become a father or a mother. It's bloody difficult being a parent, and it's almost impossible to be a family and raise children. It's a huge task. I mean, we've done it. We've made the sacrifices. We've made sure our kids have got through all their high school education, got to a position where they can go to universities, get good jobs and that. But we went without these things here and there. We made sure we had the money to pay the school fees. I suppose a reasonable number of people. There's those people who got full trust in the public system and let their children go through the public system. And there's other people like myself who found, at least in Victoria, that the public system was not really doing the job I expected to do, and so was willing to stump, up $4,000 or $5,000 per year per child into the Catholic system. So I suppose that's the difference between people's own set of values and what they're prepared to do, and their connection with their children and what the children are worth to them, as in their future and what you want to see them aspire to, rather than just being simply, well, I've got them, I'll get some money from the welfare system and I'll spend it on me.
So it's called priorities, Bill, and it's just like these parents, it's just like the government. The priorities are just so out of touch with community expectations, and it's just too easy to hand it to someone else. Got a problem? No, hand the gap. I'm sick of government being in my life, and I wouldn't like to go down that other road. But it's easy to say we've got to get tough, but we've got to get sensible about it. The whole Youth Justice Act needs to be scrapped and start from bottom to top, complete restructure, because what they're doing is not working, hasn't worked for 30 years, and they want us to just suck it up. I don't think so.
The scary thing is, like, I think one of the figures quoted recently in the paper was they spent 500, like the current Labor government was sort of patting it, saying, well, we are doing things, we're spending money on this, and they spent $500 million to provide 100 more beds for these juveniles.
But that
$500 million for 100 beds. Now that should scare the pants off every taxpayer, because what you're talking about is massive amount of money that's not going towards education, aged care, health. That's being, and that's just for 100 beds. And multiply what the whole cost of those juvenile offenders is to the overall tax bill or expenditure bill of the government, and where it could definitely be better used. And the other thing that should get up people's nose is, if you're a responsible parent and making all the efforts to get your kids through school, into the system, have good values, join the community through sports, community work, get sort of the best out of school, go on to university and get a job. Now, I just look at my my children, like they went and worked at Kmart, you know, because I didn't have it. We were paying for the school fees. They weren't going to get a lot of pocket money to go with that as well. So they got a job at Coles or Kmart to get them through those school years, to give them some extra quid, and then they got into university. And when they came out of university, they had a $50,000+ HECS bill. So you do all the right things, you don't get you get bugger all from the government, and then at the end of the day, they come out and they start a job and they start off with a $50,000 bill. Now, Mr. Juvenile Delinquent, he's gone through the system and he's cost the taxpayer, probably by the time he's 18, he's probably cost if he started off at 12, he's probably cost the taxpayer anywhere between, you know, $500,000 plus, if not more, and he's not going to contribute to society. I mean, so there's what annoys me. We've got to spend all this many money on people who are not going to really contribute to the economy or to the community, and that there's no money for rewarding those people who do make the efforts. Like, if you want to send your children do the right thing and send them to play soccer, netball, whatever, well, you've got to pay your fees, you've got to pay uniforms. There's all that sort of cost. You've got to go and do the committee stuff. You've got to go and do the fundraising and all the other hours you put in. Well, I'd rather see that money that's going on the people who are not so good go to the people who are doing the right thing. So they basically get their netball uniforms free, their fees free, and all those sort of things. You know, put it into people who are doing the right thing, rather than having to spend it people who are doing the wrong thing.
This is the cradle to grave mentality that governments are foisting on younger people these days. I think the government's there for everything. The government is just there for the basics. You row your own boat. It's just too easy for people to say, oh, it's the government's got to do that, or government's got to do that. The government is us. The government is our taxpayers. They have got no grasp on reality, and this is what you're getting.
People got to understand that governments don't have any money.
They've got
they only have other people's money, namely yours and mine, and everyone who's working and all the business. That's where their money comes from, and they in their wisdom decide where they spend it. But I tell you what, they spend it pretty poorly, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. They give money away willy-nilly to well, there's all sorts. There's not just the welfare system. There's also the corporate welfare system, and I see sometimes where that's very unfair. Because we'll just move away from juvenile for a minute. But one of the stories in the last week too was did you see the thing about the pontoon that's going out onto the reef that was built in Cairns and is going out on the reef for one of these companies? Did you see that story at all? Yeah. Well, the federal government gave that company a grant of taxpayers' money of $3 million. Now that's welfare. That's company welfare.
Of course it is.
That gives that company an advantage over other competitors. Yes. Now, the federal government, and we've got a federal government election coming up, it's not the federal government's bloody responsibility to shore up all these businesses. Our federal government's responsibility is defence, immigration, biosecurity for the nation, and nation building. Not this, not this pork barreling stuff like, we'll get you a new school cafeteria, or we'll get your sports complex a new toilet block at a local level.
We could get you a new wharf for a place that's on a mud flat. Yeah, that might be a good idea too. Oh, did someone mention Yarrabah? Yeah. So yeah, there's $12 million down the drain, but you won't ever see any criticism of that, because that'll be buried in reports that no one will ever see. And what they'll do, they'll put more money into it just to try and dress up the pig that it is, a complete white elephant. That's just another example of wasted taxpayers' money.
I suppose the other thing that's been in the news just recently, Warren Entsch has got out there and he's been supposedly fighting for his constituents and the people of regional Australia to do something about our insurance, which has been basically rising exponentially since probably Larry, who probably was the longest ago that started off the sharp rise in insurance premiums. That was followed by Yasi, and we've just had a stream of increases since. So they've just managed to get the reinsurance pool, the Commonwealth's reinsurance pool. What's your take on that story?
Yeah. Look, Bill, I'll be the first bloke to shout Warren Entsch a beer once I get my 46% reduction in insurance premium. I will make sure I'm at his front door giving him that beer, but I'm pretty sure my beer is safe in my fridge, because he has been banging on about this for, I don't know, at least 15 years. And it just begs belief that he keeps trotting out this stuff. Yeah, there might be money there. That doesn't mean the insurance companies are going to make it any cheaper. And if it's less than anywhere less than 46% reduction, as he promised, well, people are going to be pretty disappointed in poor old Warren.
I think the other thing is the reinsurance pool is basically for cyclone damage and things like that, and just puts a cap or a safety blanket there, or safety net there for the insurance, that some of the costs after the damage from a cyclone will be funded by this pool. But
it won't be diluted once the Brisbane flood problem comes up.
We're not sure what's going to happen with the Brisbane floods. They're going to be a pretty horrific story, and the cost. But the thing is, you can be assured insurance premiums will rise because of the floods in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. That's natural, but I'm sure ours will rise also, but it will be a greater rise than what happens in the southwest.
Absolutely, and their rises won't be 200 or 300% like we copped up here. There's no way that their constituents will put up for the crap we've had to put up the last 15 years. It's just ridiculous, Bill.
I think the other thing is, my understanding too, is just like any financial institution, whether it be bank, insurance, or financial institutions like hedge funds or super funds, they all have to have a license from the Commonwealth government. Now, to my way of thinking, the best way to fix that in regards to insurers not being in all the markets in Australia is just at a stroke of a pen. It doesn't need an act or anything like that. Just change the regulations at a bureaucratic level and say, with licensing for insurance companies, the requirement is to have a license in Australia. You have to insure every market, and the affordability has to be spread across that whole market.
Exactly, all of Australia, not just
the big you can't pick and choose your markets. If you're an insurer, you're in Australia, you're in the Australian insurance market, you have to compete, you have to offer insurance to every Australian, no matter where they are, what their business is, or whatever. If you don't want to do that, well, then don't operate in Australia at all. Go away, you know, and
That's
that's
a
it.
very, yeah, that's a very good point, Bill.
And just leave it to those ones who are willing. And then if there's not enough or no one's willing, well, then it just comes back to, well, we just reinvent GSIO or state government insurance officers, and that's it. And
I'm
and
surprised
they've got to work
hasn't been
for,
done.
and they've got to work for sure for nothing more than cost plus a couple of percent sort of thing. And that's the end of it. I mean, if these private companies cannot be allowed to continue to pick and choose their markets, they're either insuring all Australians or none.
Exactly, and that's where SGIO would be brilliant, Bill. That's a good point. That would bring real competition into the marketplace.
I'm not a real fan of government being involved in these sort of things.
Neither am I, but I'm not a fan of getting jammed by private enterprise either.
Yeah, but the whole point is if government's role is to regulate and make sure people are playing the game properly in the market, and if they're not prepared to, well, then they just leave the market. So that's the role of government, and I don't think the Commonwealth's fulfilling their obligation in regards to the issuing of licences in Australia, and they need to tighten up the regulations to ensure that all insurance providers provide for all Australian markets.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, did you hear of another closure on the Coranda Range this week?
No, I haven't noticed any more.
Yeah, it was out for a couple of hours again this week. I just can't believe that we're still having this conversation after all these years. And the Mad Hatter brings out that bridle track proposal, like, as if the people of Redlands are going to put up with that.
But I think that here's another thing. Reading the paper, like the Cairns Post, if you read the paper, there's been a number of stories in regards to the Coranda Range, and Chris Calcino has been fairly good on this point. And he highlighted in regards to the hypocrisy of the Department of Main Roads. When we had the application for Curworld to be built up near Coranda, part of the reason that was not back in the approvals process was the Coranda Range could not handle the extra volume of traffic of that $600 million proposed development.
We've been beyond capacity of the range. Yes.
On the Range Road. Then we've just recently had the release of the Cairns Northern Tablelands transport strategy, which basically looked at the northern end of the Tablelands at the Rex Highway, the Coranda, the Gillies and the Palmerston. And that report basically came out when it got to the Coranda thing. It says the Coranda Range is within capacity and is not expected to reach a situation where its capacity is to have another upgrade or a replacement until 2051. To look at it. No, that's just to look at it. That's not to have something done by then. That's just so you can't have a body that says in one foul breath in 2000, I think it must be in 2017 or something, that Curwell got knocked on it, maybe 19, says will be beyond capacity of Curwell, but then says now in this release that was only in January, end of January this year, says we've got to Coranda Range has got to 2051 before it becomes a real problem. And to Chris Calcino's credit, he called them out over that, and there's a reasonable amount of information.
And the response, Bill?
Pardon?
And the response?
And the response is?
Silence.
Well, no, they had a couple of, is it Miles or Bailey? Bailey, isn't it? The transport guy.
Yeah.
I think he came out and he says, well, and actually it was the day before that was released, they put out information in regards to, we'll put in these technical responses in regards to the Coranda Range. We'll have electronic control speed variable signs. So we can slow the traffic down if there's instances in that. We can stop the flow with lights, make it one way down, one-way traffic for certain times and let it up if there's problems. And also have a rapid response accident team when there's an incident. And
the next day they have
and that will help us get through to 2051.
Yeah, I know. We've got to get rid of these politicians that just talk rubbish, Bill. They just talk rubbish. But there's one range they didn't mention, Bill, and that's the one at Wangeti. I know it's not a main roads one, but that is another access to the tablelands that no one wants to touch with a barge fault, and it's there sitting there. That's
I know the
road, alternate road to the tablelands.
Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of those options in general, past ones and that, I think they've got a lot of underlying geological issues that need to be resolved.
They spend money everywhere else.
Well, just like upgrading the current roads to 2 lanes each way. Well, that'd be a nightmare in regards to road closures while it's happening. But the other thing is the land on the side of those hills is so unstable that it starts to pose a problem. Even now, there's a lot of that road going up the Kuranda Range is already underpinned to improve stability. So there's a lot of problems there. So I think there is going to have to be a Guernsey for a new way, a new road, a new access. Partly because of this instability of the current road, but also just the delay and the inconvenience of having that road worked on while people are still trying to go up and down. So an alternative new way. Now, if people have read, again, using newspapers, local newspapers and that, Cairns has carried a number of stories on different proposals for a new Kuranda Range bypass. We've had the Mareeba Creek. I think theirs comes through Davies Creek, over the ranges into the back of Red Lynch and onto the arterial. We've got the Cadders with the bridle track, and I think that runs basically, but also comes out fairly south of Cairns. I think it comes out beyond White Rock area or something like that.
I think the bridle track's the one that goes through Red Lynch, and the Cadders one, the new one, is the one you're talking about. It ends up at White Rock somewhere.
I thought Cadders was the bridle track going out of the thing, and the one that Mareeba people push for comes through Red Lynch.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a couple then, and then on the weekend, I think we had Brett Duck come up with his suggestion in regards to north of the Kuranda Range, coming through somewhere near the Kuranda Range station and coming into the back of Smithfield. That had a couple. I think
you'll find the gradient would be way too steep for that, Bill.
No, well, it meets the gradient requirements. So I think if you look at a couple of these spots, they don't exceed the height of the ranges where a lot of these points are around about the 413 meters. So you can get that in a reasonable gradient. But I think the one that comes out from Kuranda Station, Forest Station to Smithfield, had a couple of short tunnels to take some of the height of it.
Yeah. I think the best one that I've ever seen, Bill, is the one that Peter Campion pushed from around Davies Creek and end up on the industrial side of the highway at White Rock, which is right in the middle of all the distribution. It just makes so much sense, and use that fill to put on move the fuel tanks over there, and we're done.
Yeah, but again, here's the thing. Everyone's talking about the solutions, and no one's talked about the requirement. Now, you have to decide what the requirement for the road is. What are the critical requirements that you want? It has to take a volume of traffic safely. It has to take double Bs. It has to take wide loads. It has to take dangerous goods. It has to take heavy loads. Now,
does it have to take dangerous goods, Bill?
I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. That's what has to be worked out first.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to have a connections from the Port of Cairns to the Tablelands and then to the Cape Beyond. Now, the Cape Beyond for economic development may require heavy mining machinery, large-scale industrial loads. It may require chemicals to be sent up there that are dangerous. So, and another thing at the moment, I've heard stories that on the Kuranda Range, fuel trucks going up there, which are just a single articulated vehicle with a single tank of fuel, are going up there half empty because they can't guarantee the weight with the for the road. So you're going up there with a 40 odd ton truck with a load of fuel on it, and it's going half full to do a job. Now that's garbage. Now fuel tankers cannot go through tunnels. It's illegal. So if you go to build anything with a tunnel, well, they're out of the way. So what you're saying, if you get a new road, and the fuel tankers and dangerous goods and oversized and overweight vehicles can't go through it, well, the Kuranda Range is never going to get upgraded to carry those things. So you are condemning those heavy type vehicles to go all the way down to the Palmerston to get up and down, which adds zillions to the cost of freight. Or they might be able to upgrade the Rex Range Road a little bit to bring it up to like a Palmerston, so those sort of, but it's still a long way around. Now, if you're going to spend a lot of money on this new bypass to get up onto the Tablelands, well then surely you want to maximise the economic benefits from the start. You don't want a road that restricts any economic activity. So my question is, where is the transport industry, the chambers of commerce, FNQ Rock, and anyone else who's in that sort of area? Where are these people getting together to write up the criteria for this road? These are the specifications it needs to meet. It needs to carry this stuff. And the other factor now that's becoming more and more essential, maybe, is with the saber rattling of China, Cairns is going to have to be seriously looked at again as a strategic port, and we may even be looking at Sherga, which is up near Weipa, which is the Air Force Base. Maybe that has to be upgraded as well, and the road in between, and then the access to porting facilities here and at Weipa have to be upgraded to service the whole peninsula, the whole Cape. So I think, with all due respects to Bob Catter and his bridle track, to Ken Harley and his crew up in Mareeba, to Peter Campion, to Brett Duck, until there's a specification of requirements written, it is pointless, absolutely pointless coming up with solutions, because if they don't meet the criteria that provides a great advancement in our economic growth, we're all dunning ourselves. So I think
you're right with that, Bill.
So I think everyone needs to be reminded, get these people right. You want these roads, but you've got to get the people, the experts in that together to give a defined requirement that has to be met, and then you can build something. It's like I was in the Air Force in the later stages of procuring equipment, whether it was radio equipment, radar equipment, and the first thing we started off was we all had an idea what was out there and was what we liked, but what had to happen, you had to go back to the start in regards to, well, what
do you
is
want?
needed to do the job. And so you write a basic specification, you get the people who actually use the equipment to write their requirements, what they needed, what the definition of their radar was, how much range it had, how much the scale was, all these sort of things, and its resolution, all those sort of things have to be put down first. Then you could go out and then you could look at what's available, and if it didn't, in some cases, what's available didn't meet the job, you could start looking at putting out tenders for new equipment that hasn't, for people to design it. So that's got to be the starting point. If we keep, I mean, I can sit here and I can come up with two proposals that are not even on the board, and I think they're great, but that's not the point, you know. And all the people doing this work need to go back and poke sticks at people who can actually say, well, it might be the Port of Cairns Authority, the trucking industry, all the rest, and academics or whatever, write the spec. And it might even have to, the Department of Defence might even have to have a say what they think that as time goes by, what might have to actually go on that road. Yeah. So, you know, we might have to take Abraham's tanks up the road, up the range, and that's not going to go through a standard tunnel.
But Bill, all those points are absolutely correct what you say, but we lack the leadership from the top down to the local government. We're completely lacking in it. So where do you start? Well, because everyone they all want to be peacocks. Mine's the best way. They don't want to listen to anyone else but themselves.
Well, I think here's our real problem. The state government is not doing its job. The government in
Brisbane, knock me over with a feather, Bill.
It doesn't care. It doesn't even think about economic or development in regional Australia, and that's where you've got an Office of Regional Development, Water, and all those sort of things. They're the first cab off the rank that should be looking at the development and coming up with the requirements, and they should be speaking to the Commonwealth in regards to, all right, we've got to look at this requirement for economic growth. What do you want as far as the Commonwealth? What do you see being needed to for your people in your jurisdiction, like defence and those things, what they'll need in the future for that road to be there. Yeah. I think that's the starting point, and I think and that's what's sadly missing out of this conversation is the people who are supposed to be there for the development of the state and the regions, you know, need to be proactive in these sort of areas. And as you can see from the road report from the Department of Roads, Transport and Roads, that is basically make do minimum for as long as you can. And when they drag you kicking and screaming, promise them a study until they kick and then keep going. There is no, and this is what I think it's fairly shameful. It's fairly shameful, and really is that it looks like the Commonwealth government will have to be, in the end, have to be the driver.
But how are they going to drive it, Bill? Because you brought it up before. We've just had, I think it's the 4th head of the Northern Australia
infrastructure facility
in 4 years. Now, what's going on with that joint? And they're supposed to be one of the lead agencies in providing infrastructure for Northern Australia. What the hell is going on there?
Well, if anyone looks at the Northern Australian Infrastructure Fund, it was only ever a loans council, boondoggle, for providing money to mostly private industry. That was its focus, to implement projects and that. And I mean, it's been pretty poor at hand. But the whole point is, in the time where it's historically the cheapest time ever in the world to borrow money, if you've got to depend on a government to give you money, then your project has got no commercial value. It's obviously not worth it to the banks or that. So it's your project is fairly dubious. It's that if your last port of call or
Is
the
government.
call is the government. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
But the North Queensland North Australian Infrastructure Fund, the biggest beneficiaries of that have been the public service, the boondoggle, getting 20 or 30 staff, a person there in charge of with a $500,000 salary, a business credit card, business class, flying everywhere, whatever, first class accommodation,
another money pit.
And delivery is nothing.
Another money pit. You mentioned the road being fit for purpose. I on the weekend, excuse me, I was down in Innisfail and saw them transporting some of the wind blades and towers up the Palmerston Highway up to the I think it's the Caban wind project up there, Bill.
Yeah, the one that's being built at the moment is Caban, and that's only 28 turbines altogether.
That's right.
And the next cab off the rank is Columban, and that's 95 wind turbines. That's
correct. And the turbines, the blades are 90 metres each, so that's roughly a 250 metre radius. It is a gigantic farm, and there's no reason to build it because wind doesn't provide the energy. So why are we wasting our money on it, Bill?
Those people obviously think that they're going to make a profit, or
are
being guaranteed. They're building it because they're guaranteed a profit.
Of course they are.
And we consumers and taxpayers will be footing any bill to make sure that profit is there.
And no one's held accountable for this. It's pigs at the trough, the taxpayers' trough. Yeah.
I think the other thing is, I mean, there's I think there's a movement called Save Columban at the moment, and I think a lot of people who were pro wind power and saving the world from climate change were all in favour of new wind farms and that, and they supported the Emerald wind farm when that was put in. I think that's about 30 turbines. But I think the local community in Cairns, the environmental community, is probably maybe reconsidering their position now, or the true environments anyway, because you accepted Emerald Hill or Emerald Wind Farm, then you got Caban on, and now you got Columban. So within a space of a few years, you suddenly got these three great areas of wind farms. Now, the one in Emerald Hill, the Emerald Wind Farm, that was mainly on the existing cleared land type things on the up at Walkerman. But Caban and Columban are now in actual forest or areas, which the environmentalists have a stake. I mean, they have a stake in it in regards to, they put a lot of effort to stop things like logging and keep the environment as it was. And of course, they are backed up by the government and the EPA and all those sort of EIS type things to push logging out of our area. But now, with the wind farms, there seems to be no protection at all. At the state level, these wind farms get a tick, regardless of their environmental impact. It's not something that the state government has anything to do with anymore. It just simply ticks and passes to the Commonwealth for final approval.
Yeah, when you do a project, we have to go through every hoop known to man. These wind things, because it says wind, they're fast tracked through with no It's just tick and flick things. Even in that Chilumban application, they identified, the proponents identified 3. There's a red goshawk, a magnificent brood frog, and some sort of glider. I can't remember what the glider is, but even in their own impact statement,
I think that glider is called diced.
Yeah, it will be. But even in the own impact statement, they say it will be a significant impact on those threatened species, and nothing is. They just tick it. So they even admitted that it might even decimate it.
But this is the thing in regards to, even if you logged, even if I don't know what the status of or the type of trees that are in Chilumban, whether they're worth harvesting as trees and milling and that, but there was a lot of a timber industry around Ravenhove anyway, prior. But even when you log a forest, yes, there's an impact on existing fauna, but it's not necessarily as dramatic as what we're proposed with these sort of things that go through and cover such a large area and strip the surface for road access, just obliterate it. At least when foresters go through, they usually
selective.
They basically will survey the whole area to do a tree count. They'll work out what trees are worthwhile and stuff like that. So when it actually comes, these days of clear felling is not on, and it hasn't been practiced for yonks. It's now very, very, very selective. They want the most valuable wood, and they no longer have to knock everything down to get it. They can selectively take a tree out, and they've even these days, like that, especially like I did a show on the forestry industry in Finland. You can actually, if you want to, you can actually mill the timber on site. You can actually bring these portable logging sawmills with you and saw it on site and just take the cut material straight back for going in the kilns or drying or whatever. And you can do whatever you need with the rubbish in regards to either chip it down to for composting or that in the immediate area, or you can actually take the chips away and dispose of them. Or these days, you could probably get carbon credits by taking it away and putting it in a furnace to boil a bit of water to produce electricity. So I think what the environmentalists might be really need to look at is, well, maybe we should have just let a bit of logging go on and just stop these wind farms from going on, because I think they're getting a much worse deal. The environments get a much worse deal now than it ever did from logging. And the other scary thing is people just do not have any concept of how many wind farms you need to replace baseload power. Like, I think these people in Cairns have been astounded. We've got the Emerald Wind Farm, Caban, and now Chilumban. And then as you go downtown, I think there's going to be a huge one down towards Townsville, even bigger. But there's even more scheduled along the grid, that existing power grid, because it's just a matter that the closer you are to the existing grid, it's cheaper to connect up. So we could have several more farms.
Once again, government is providing no leadership whatsoever, and they're just fast tracking these rorts. The state government should be absolutely embarrassed of what they're doing.
I don't think they've even got any idea of the scale of what they need to replace baseload power, and so they just keep, well, we need more wind farms, we need more solar farms, but I don't think they've actually done a bit of a count on the footprint and how many of these things you need. But I'll just give you an example. The Cooper's Gap down near in the Southern Downs, I think it is. That's the largest, currently the largest wind farm in Australia. It covers about 102 square kilometres. It's got 123 turbines. It produces around about, it's got a nameplate power generation of 600 megawatts.
Be lucky
Now,
to get 200.
Well, 600, you need to get 600 megawatts as base load. What you need is 4 times that. You need 2.4 gigawatts of wind farm turbine, and then you have to back it up with batteries. That's the only way you can get to a equivalent base load power. So
I think what you missed out there, Bill, is what you need. You need wind. And at the moment, I'm looking at my app here. In Queensland, we're generating 6,159 megawatt hours, and wind is contributing 105. So, and that's before it'll get lighter
as the evening goes on.
So what the hell are we wasting our money for?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. The government and the environmentalists don't understand how much wind you have to put into the system. Like I say, to replace 1 gigawatt of baseload power, you need about 4 gigawatts of wind, nameplate wind turbine, and then you need 10 gigawatt hours of battery, and that will deliver you 1 gigawatt of baseload power. But that is equivalent to 8 Cooper's Gap wind farms just to get 1 gigawatt, plus you have to have the battery as well. So that means you need 800 odd square kilometres of land with 1,500 odd wind turbines to get you 1 gigawatt. Now the whole
make this stuff up, Bill. It's just too ridiculous for words.
But the thing is, we need 40 on the east coast of Australia. We need 40 gigawatts of baseload power for the peak time. Now, if you extrapolate that 1 gigawatt out 40 times, you know, you're blanketing so much of the country, and then you need those batteries and the footprint of for getting all the rare earths for both the wind turbines, solar panels, and the batteries is a huge investment or ecological footprint for mining, processing, and manufacturing of those items. So I don't know.
The last 25 years at best.
and
then you got to
do it all again. And you do it all again.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, I'm sure if anyone, again, if they looked at either the regional papers like Cairns Post over the last few months, they would have seen photos of those wind turbines, the blades. Well, I think the onus is now on to start digging the holes to put those blades in 20 years' time, because if we start digging the holes now, they might be ready for all those blades to be buried in, because no one has resolved the problems with disposal of these things. Because in the United States, they've actually, they were looking at transporting them from, because there's a lot of wind up in Minnesota and on those Montana and places like that, where a lot of these wind, and they were looking at transporting them all the way down to Texas, setting up a special facility down there to grind them up. And the costs were just so high, and the logistics, and then no one really had a real good idea what the end use for the Roundup blades would be. So the decision was to bury them. So
put them in the coal plant you just decommissioned, Bill. There's already a big hole there.
Okay, if we just move on, any other stories? I can just flick a couple if you like.
No, I'm following you, Bill.
Okay then. I think generally in the last few weeks we've had stories on the Crime and Corruption Commission, and I think it was only a couple of weeks ago that the Mayor of Cairns was cleared of any wrongdoing in regards to his investigation. We've had a number of other ones where people have been cleared. There has been down towards, I think it was Ipswich Way or Toowoomba, someone go to prison down there for their little shenanigans. But from the Crime and Corruption Commission, we see a fairly active program at looking at councils in general, but they seem to not have the goods on the state government when it comes to any real problems there. Do you think there's a situation developing where the Crime and Corruption Commission is sort of just looking for soft targets because it hasn't got either the will or the capacity or the authority to really get stuck into it at state level?
Well, Bill, once again, it all comes back to leadership. The Crime and Misconduct Commission, look at their track record. It is disgraceful. Their conviction rate is just shot, and it's thrown out on numerous occasions. So where's the confidence in having a thorough investigation? This is only my personal view, that our mayor may have been lucky that they've been embarrassed so much lately that they've decided, look, we're not going to go there, because I don't think they've got the ability to do it. I don't think that they're competent enough to do it. And the record is just atrocious.
The other thing they might have a bit of problem with is also they don't seem to have a preliminary scheme to weed out vexatious claims or things that are so trivial. They actually let them come through and they develop into a big problem for councils and that, who have basically done little or no wrong, but the investigation. So I think there obviously needs to be some sort of nets put in there, so people who are making claims have to stump up some decent information and be prepared to face the people they're accusing as well, rather than just offhand just throw something into the ring, or throw a bomb in there and let's see what happens.
That's the lower end, but Bill, what about the higher end stuff with the excuse me, the 4 officials that resigned in the last month? They're high ranking officials that have resigned, in protest to at the government's corruption, basically. So well, the Triple C should be all over them like a cheap suit.
Well, I think that is the problem. I think the Triple C, to be seen to be doing something, is going after the low-hanging fruit, because it's not either equipped enough, competent enough, or resourced enough to go for the things that it should actually be going over in regards to government accountability. And I think this is one of the shortcomings in our system of government is the Auditor General. I think we need to up status the Auditor General, so he has a lot of power to support things like the Crime and Corruption Commission to make sure it does its job. He's got to hold the government account for funding to make sure these people can do the job, get the right people to do the job, and have the proper authority to do it. But we seem to not have that level of power in that jurisdiction in the Auditor General. In the United States, they have the equivalent is called an Inspector General, and he wields huge power in regards to against the federal government and within their state governments as well. And they're very independent. So we probably need first to upgrade the status of our our Auditor Generals, and then also make things like the crime and corruption come under his auspices, not under Parliament's. So it's a bit more independent. But that's
integrity when that happens.
Yeah, but that's for other people to work out. And that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of constitutional lawyers and people who deal with this that should be coming up with the answers, not you and I.
Exactly.
What else can we move on to? We've had COVID.
We're over COVID.
Well, on Sunday, the masks is coming back off, but I don't know whether you have noticed or not, going into the shopping centres. I think somewhere between 10 and 20% of the people are not wearing masks anymore.
They've had enough.
And I basically think people are over it. And I can't see what the difference is between today, last week, and next Sunday.
Just the
I
last dying
don't think it makes one iota of difference. So I just don't understand. The thing is, when the health guy gets up there, the chief health officer gets there, and he talks about, you know, bringing down, he should get up there on that day and just bring forward everything he can, and that's it, and say nothing about anything else. Not say, oh, we're putting masks off, masks will come off in a month. And that's just stupid. I mean, you say nothing, or you just take them off right now. But
it's been a nonsensical approach to the whole thing, Bill. What about the unvaccinated people? When are they going to be allowed to actually go to restaurants and state government offices and all this sort of rubbish? There's been no date set for that. They're still treated as second-class Australians, which is ridiculous.
But the other thing is, the reason they unpersoned the unvaccinated is because we're supposed to be contaminated or unclean or whatever. But the evidence that shows it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not. If you come in contact with the virus, you can still contract it. You may not even notice you got it, but you will pass it on. You will transmit it.
Whether you're vaxxed or not, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. And
so why the discrimination?
Yeah, so the discrimination is pointless. I think at the end of the day, it would be interesting if we can, not to try to apportion any blame, but when this is over, we probably need we definitely need a royal commission to look into what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and what ground rules we're going to have for next time. Because you can bet your little poopy, in another few years we're going to go through something similar again, because this type of medical research, gain of function, is out there all the time. I have no doubt that there's medical facilities, governments and that continuing to act to advance gain of function with viruses and that. So it can always happen again, and we need some benchmarks in regards to what we should and shouldn't do and when we should do it.
But we had that, Bill. At the beginning of this rubbish, the World Health Organization said, do not isolate people. It doesn't work. And what did? We isolated everyone. Like, we are just nuts. It was there, black and white. Do not do that. And we chose not to do it.
But my thing is, I've got no faith in the World Health Organization. I'm talking about what the Australian government should do for the Australian people. And I'm sure before this happened, we had a pandemic plan in somewhere in a cupboard, right? but obviously they didn't pull it out and go by it. They just made up their own rules as they got. Because my understanding was when Abbott was the Minister for Health way back in 2012 or something, as Health Minister, he was part of a group that sort of updated the pandemic and other medical emergencies. So we need to make sure we develop it again, if we haven't got it, or at least upgrade the one we've got that's been hidden away, a plan that's out there in public, so anyone can go to a website and see what the response is to a pandemic. And I think one of the biggest problems that happened right from the start, there was the engagement of the state politicians in the thing, where they started to say, well, we can't let our health systems be overwhelmed. But health systems have never been designed and were never intended to be able to cater for
everyone.
for pandemics. There was supposed to be other contingencies brought into things. It's saying, it's like, right, there's no way you're going to build a hospital system to cope with a pandemic. That means you would have to have 4 or 5 hospitals in Cairns, you know, and most of them would be empty. You'd have to have, you know, tens of thousands of extra staff that would be twiddling their thumbs because they wouldn't be dealing with a pandemic. The idea of a pandemic plan is instigate those things that you need to make sure you can provide the best healthcare immediately, and then on move the people who need extra care into the hospital system. But it's like anything. Things like showgrounds should be activated to be triage centres where sick people come, they get assessed, they can stay there. If they're a bit unwell, if they're not too bad, they go home. And they should just keep circulating, you know. They
So
should.
the Royal Commission will come up with a plan.
That's right. And
but the problem is, there's only one person that I know of who's calling for it, and that's Pauline Hanson. The rest, the major players are absolutely silent on it, Bill.
And I think this has been a problem all the way through. Is the lockstep between the Commonwealth and the states in regards to suppression of information, mandating of reducing our freedoms and that. And I think probably the worst thing that ever happened, it was Morrison formed the National Cabinet. That should never have happened. Yeah. And they should have run independently with their different advice and information, and they just had to argue it out, whatever was the best, and just move on with it. But I think once we formed that National Cabinet, I think it was all over the Commonwealth. It had basically been completely hamstrung, and the states were in full control, and even the federal government was just going along for the ride.
It was just a wallet.
That was a shameful situation.
Yeah, 100% right.
Anyway, we've gone for a little while. Other urgent things that we can talk about in the local landscape. Just touching on Townsville, we had, of course, in Cairns a few weeks ago, be about 2 going on 3 weeks ago, we had the stolen car, and I think it was in P Street. There was an accident. One of the juveniles were killed. 5 were injured. And then just this week earlier in Townsville, we had a stolen car. 2 people from the car ran away from the crashed car. One entered the Ross River and drowned. Are these the things that may slow down perpetrators? Because there's a story in today's paper that since the accident in P Street in Cairns, there has been a drop off in stolen vehicles and instances.
I think mere coincidence, Bill.
Merely coincidence. Just maybe because five, 6 people are removed from doing the crimes.
Yeah.
But it's in the last, it's a bit more than 12 months. We've had, I think her name was Jennifer Broad in Townsville, was killed by a car that was pursuing a stolen car, hit the median strip, lost control, and ran into a motorcycle, killing her. Then we had that shocking accident down in, I think it was Alexandra Gardens in Brisbane Way, where a family was mowed down by a stolen car. And then we've just had the latest incident in Cairns and Townsville. It's fairly shameful that even after those sort of incidents, we're still not getting the response from our leaders or Brisbane. And let's face it, it's Brisbane who makes these decisions. It's Brisbane that's got the control, but they still don't seem to be. And in fairness, I mean, the Alexandra Gardens one happened in Brisbane, and that even though it happened down there, they still don't seem to get it in regards to the crime situation. But I've got to admit, they got the full weight of the law on all those COVID people who didn't abide by the rules.
Yeah.
They
No problem with
managed,
that. Yeah.
they
I
managed to
think
do
that's the
that.
low-hanging fruit, Bill.
But they're still not addressing the real problem. I think that's fairly scary, not just for the people in the regions, but it should also concern the people in the southeast Queensland as well, because the situation, as it develops down there, it probably won't get remedied either.
No, I know. But once again, it's the apathy of the general public, Bill. You're at that protest at Healy's office there a week or two ago, and you know, a city of 100,000 plus people, and there would have been lucky to be 50 people there. So you know, the apathy, people have got to take responsibility for themselves. You know, if they want something changed, they've got to get off their backside and actually do it, shake the tree.
I think it's like all causes, whether it's a separate state cause or fixing crime or that. There's just so many people who just willing to leave it to others.
Exactly.
And the other thing that's so annoying is these people in say well-to-do businesses making a lot of money from the consumers in cans or development of cans, making goods amounts of money. They actually do nothing to support these grassroots sort of thing. I mean, I haven't seen one captain of industry stand up and do anything, or be actively engaged in the thing. Or
even criticise.
Or even criticise the government. Well, my understanding is businesses don't criticise government because they're waiting for the next government handout for their business.
Yeah.
And that's
a bad way to run your business.
and I think it's quite surprising the number of businesses that are dependent on government contracts, government goodwill to go forward in that. And it just keeps them silent, and the community they actually are engaged in making money from are the ones that are suffering. I think it's time for community leaders in industry and general community to stand up and be
slate that home back to industry. Like, look at TTNQ. Like, they I can understand being apolitical, but when a government does or doesn't do something, call them out. Yeah, they are too timid to risk any sort of criticism of the government, even when they're not performing. Like, there's no way I'd give 1 cent to TTNQ. They're an embarrassment to their members.
Well, I think that goes to, I think the other thing is too, there's like areas like the Chamber of Commerce has actually, its main stakeholders is the state government through JCU, Ports North, and all those sort of institutions. So that probably cuts there. And then again, even those people in private enterprise are dependent on or looking forward to the next government grant or whatever. So they are fairly limp, if you know. So it's quite disappointing, and we have had a few people. We've got Aaron McLeod and CJAG, and then I think before COVID struck, we had I think he's I can't remember his name, Mitch, someone who was organised the rally in Cairns, and I think about 1,800 people have signed up that before the police closed it down because of COVID. But there was a head of steam building up in 2020, end in 2009, beginning of 2020, and it had got to a breaking point where a sizable rally was in train, and then COVID just stopped it, and it's like all momentum has been lost, and it's going to take some significant effort to rebuild that public momentum. But hopefully going forward, I think we've got another 2.5 years to the state election, so hopefully the momentum can build up and crime will become an issue. and people are prepared to say, well, it's such an issue now that I'm going to vote. People haven't done the job. I'm not going to vote for them. They're going to get voted out, and we'll put someone in who we think can at least give them a chance to change it. If they don't, well, then you just roll on and push them out, and so on.
What we're doing now isn't working, so yeah, it won't hurt.
Yeah. You can't keep doing the same thing over again and expect a different outcome. So
yeah, exactly.
So we don't want to keep it being insane. So we want reason, and we want improvement.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, thanks for your efforts tonight.
No worries, Bill.
What we might do is look at maybe doing a shorter segment or something like that on just one issue here and there.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
And that way we could just program it for on odd occasion here or there. Where a good story comes up that needs discussion, and there's been a lot of information about it. We can just do a quick show like this, maybe just 5, 10, 15 minutes or something like that. Or
count me in, Bill.
But I thank you for your time tonight, and we'll see you again. But if you just hold there, I'll wrap up the show.
Yep.
And introduce next week's guest.
No problem.
If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, we'll have on Jo Dodds. Now, Jo Dodds is from Bushfire Survivors Australia. She recently was in Bega in the 2019 20 fires. She has been a campaigner since that to trying to get better outcomes for the people in regional Bega and the forestry areas. She's a champion of carbon reduction. She went to Glasgow in, I think it was November last year, COP26, spoke there, and she'll be our guest next week, talking about the Bega bushfires, the trauma that's suffered by some of the people down there, and also their court case with the EPA in New South Wales to force the EPA to look at carbon emissions as part of their overall planning and that for regulations. So she'll be my guest next week. It should be an interesting conversation, and I hope you can join me again. Thank you.